Hello everyone, today I'm going to talk to the top scorer of the USMLE Step 1 who recently got 277, Yusuf Akram Tanas from Alexandria University. We will talk about everything since his decision to take the Step 1 of the boards and even until test day. We will talk about the sources he used, his way of studying, and how did he prepare throughout the journey, basically everything he did during his journey for Step 1 and his test experience, and some more advice for people who are willing to take Step 1 and even Step 2 CK. Let's go. You?
Thank you, and I'm glad to be here. I hope to share my Step 1 prep experience, and I hope it would be of benefit for the Step 1 exam takers, whether it's scored or pass-fail, or maybe even Step 2.
Before I jump into the step preparation, I want to know a little bit more about your foundational years, starting from year 1.
Yeah, sure. Just before we start, our med school is 6 years. It's not like in the US where it's 4, or other countries it's 6 years. And the first 3 years are usually more academic, and the last 3 years are the clinical years. So in the first 3 years, I studied a bit differently compared to most people. I usually rely on self-studying. I would rarely attend any lectures except for the practical sections, as we had to attend those, otherwise we won't be able to take the exam, of course. So I would rely heavily on self-studying, the textbooks that our uni provided. I would just read the textbook 3 to 4 times depending on the difficulty of the subject, and I would underline the important concepts and use Google or YouTube for anything that I'm not sure of, or for understanding complex concepts or topics that need animation.
So just so I understand, during the first 3 years, you relied only on the med school stuff, right?
Yeah.
The books of the university, of our university.
Yep.
Okay.
I rarely used any Step 1 material, except for during year 2, I read the Kaplan Immunology book. It's a microbiology and immunology book in one book, and I just read the immunology part of it. And I just read it once.
You finished the immunology?
Yeah, just reading. I don't know if this would count as Step 1 prep.
Yeah, but you already had the foundation for immunology.
Yeah, it was very easy to go through it very quickly. I didn't have to spend any time understanding anything, as my uni covered almost all of the immunology in Kaplan.
Okay, so jumping into the step preparation, when did you actually, decide that you want to get prepared for Step 1 of the boards?
When I first decided I really should start studying for Step 1 properly, it was around the beginning of the pandemic, which was around Feb in Egypt. Our uni obviously stopped, and we had a big holiday. I think it was like 6 months holiday.
So during the pandemic, you mean the summer of third year, right?
Well, yeah, it included the summer of third year, of course, and even before the summer, because pandemic began in Feb. So I had from Feb until all of the summer of year 3 and just the beginning of year 4.
Yeah, right. Okay.
So this is when I began watching Pathoma. I watched Pathoma videos and SketchyMicro videos in around a week. All those videos, watched them at 1.5 times speed. And for Pathoma, I would watch the video and then read the corresponding chapter in the textbook. For example, if the video is about neoplasia, I'd watch this neoplasia video at 1.5 times speed and then read the corresponding chapter from the textbook.
And the reason you watch it 1.5x is not having enough time to go through it, or just to focus on the whole video?
Honestly, it's more of a focusing thing. It helped me stay more focused when the video is at 1.5 to 2 times speed. If it were slow at normal speed, I sometimes doze off and it's more difficult to concentrate.
That's interesting. What else other than SketchyMicro and Pathoma?
I watched a couple of videos on YouTube, and there was one video where somebody scored 272, and they kept emphasizing how important Qbanks are in their prep, and how it's their secret weapon to getting
This is Daniel, right?
Yeah.
I'm gonna put his link down below for the video.
Absolutely. So this is when I decided I should do as many questions as possible. And I also began with pass test, Qbank, and I then moved on to Becker, AMBOSS, Kaplan, and UWorld.
Okay, and then Anking, right? After the Qbanks?
No, I started Anking just before year 4. This was in the middle of AMBOSS. So after I did 1,000 questions at AMBOSS, I was introduced to Anki, and I started the Anking deck.
Okay, so SketchyMicro, Pathoma, Qbanks, most of them, all of them basically.
Almost all of the ones you could find online.
And Anking deck, which is, can you tell the audience what is Anking?
All right, so Anking, I think this is the most comprehensive Anki deck you could find for step 1 so far. I think it's based off of first aid. It has almost all the important points in first aid in flashcard format, and it also has many important points from Boards and Beyond and Pathoma. And it also incorporates the sketches from SketchyMicro and SketchyPath and SketchyFarm. So if you watch the sketchy videos, it's going to be much easier for you to reinforce their
How many flashcards are there?
How many flashcards in the entire deck?
Yeah.
Well, I had version 8, and I think this was around 32,000 flashcards.
32,000. So it basically covers all you need to know for step 1.
Yeah, almost
in
everything.
In flashcard format.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
After a week of watching Pathoma and SketchyMicro videos, I immediately began with Qbanks, and my first Qbank was pass test. I did 40 questions every day, a block of 40 questions. I would obviously finish the block in an hour, and I would review it in another hour. I did not read all the explanations, to be honest, as I felt that pass tests explanations are not that good, and there were some concepts that I understood very well, so I felt like it would be a waste of time to read every single explanation.
You were basically experimenting with pass tests.
Yeah, I was exactly. I was experimenting with pass test. So yeah, I was getting my feet wet basically, and I felt like it was a good start. And then I moved on to Becker. Now Becker is the only Qbank that I did offline. The other Qbanks were all online, because Becker is not there anymore. It's an old Qbank, and I only did 1,000 questions of this Qbank because I found that there were so many mistakes in their explanations, and I was worried if this could affect my foundation, as I was still creating my foundation, and I did not want to read from anything that had mistakes.
Right. The next Qbank is?
After this, I began RX. And actually, wait a second. Before RX, I took NBME 15, and I scored 252.
Oh, so in addition to the Qbanks, you took also NBME?
Yeah, I was taking an NBME almost like once a month.
Once a month to check your...
Yeah. Okay. So after Becker, I took NBME 15 and scored 252, and then I began with RX. And I think RX is the first proper Qbank that I started with. First two were kind of like experimental, like you said. And I believe RX is a very underrated Qbank, to be honest. It's not only first aid in question format. I feel like it teaches you how to think the way the exam wants you to think, and how to apply knowledge. It's not that simple. And
Really?
they have, yeah.
That's RX?
Yeah, that's and they have there are a lot of hard questions now. I think they almost have 1,000 hard questions. The entire Qbank was 2,400. And I think now they have 1,000 questions of those.
People usually say that RX is the least Qbank that focuses on critical thinking, but
it is relatively easy compared to the Qbanks that I'll be discussing later, like AMBOSS and UWorld and Qbank. But I believe it's a solid start, and it's a good way of reinforcing important facts in first aid, and also learning new concepts. There are concepts in RX that are not in first aid, and this does not necessarily mean that those concepts are high yield or they're going to come up on the real deal. I feel like the reason those Qbanks put very difficult questions is to simulate the real deal, because on the real deal you will be getting around like 5% of questions that are out of left field. So I think that's why RX has those weird questions in the hard category. So after RX, I took another NBME. It was NBME 16. And actually, wait a second. NBME 16 was after doing half of RX. I took NBME 16 and scored 250. And then after I finished RX, I took NBME 17 and scored 255. And then after those NBMEs, I began with AMBOSS. And honestly, guys, I believe this is the best Qbank. The reason I say it's the best Qbank is because
it's not because he's sponsored.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not sponsored by AMBOSS at all. I just think that my exam was closest to NBMEs, honestly. The closest was NBMEs and then AMBOSS. So and in terms of difficulty and the question stems and everything, yeah, it's closest to the NBMEs and AMBOSS. So that's why I definitely recommend doing AMBOSS right after the NBMEs. I mean, most important is definitely the NBMEs in 120 and then AMBOSS and then UWorld.
And I think after AMBOSS you had your
after 1,000 questions
exams, right?
Yeah, after 1,000 questions of AMBOSS, we began year 4. And right before we started year 4, I was introduced to Anking. And this is when I started doing the Anking deck. So midway through AMBOSS and right before I started year 4.
Okay, so after AMBOSS, what, I think UWorld, right? That's what's left.
After I finished AMBOSS, I took NBME 19 and I scored 261. Yeah, and then what did I think I did Kaplan after this. Yeah, I did Kaplan Qbank, and I did Kaplan Qbank over a long period of time because we had a lot of uni exams.
What's your opinion on Kaplan? Because it's not really as popular as the other Qbanks.
Yeah, I believe you should keep Kaplan till the end. If you're done with AMBOSS, UWorld, RX, then you could do Kaplan. And obviously, you should, before all those Qbanks, you should master the NBMEs. Like, you should make sure you understand the NBMEs very well, and then if you have enough time for Qbanks like Kaplan or past test. The point I'm trying to deliver here is that the NBMEs are the most important resource. Like, you should make sure you master those NBMEs, and then when you feel like you have enough time for other Qbanks, you could go and do them.
Amazing. Okay, so can you tell me the time frame you took for each question bank, starting from past test?
Past test took me around a month and a half. As I told you, I was doing 40 questions a day. Back then, their question bank wasn't big. It was around less than 2,000 questions. And Becker also took me a month. I only did 1,000 questions though. And honestly, at the beginning of the prep, this was all I was doing, just 40 questions a day, nothing else. And so I wasn't really studying that much. And then when I began RX, I forgot to mention that I do not usually read the explanations very often. But when I began RX, I felt like I still have big gaps in my knowledge. So I decided that I should read explanations more often. And unless the question was very easy, I would just read the educational objective. And RX was, to be honest, the only Qbank that I actually read the explanations of many questions.
Okay, this is an important point. So you're saying explanations are not always important if you are good enough with the subject, right?
Yeah. If you feel like you understand it very well, just move on. You don't have to waste time reading an explanation because it ends up being like passive learning. You're better off doing more questions or flashcard. And there's another really important point here. I did not read RX explanations because I found them really good. If anything, the other Qbanks like AMBOSS and UWorld had better explanations. But the reason I read them is because back then I still had big gaps in my knowledge. So I was like, oh no, I have to be careful and read more explanations. And then when I did 1,000 questions of AMBOSS and was introduced to Anki, I was like, oh, okay, no, now I don't need to read any explanations. I just gotta master my flashcards and make sure I understand every flashcard very well and have it memorized. Better than spending more time passive learning and reading explanations of Qbanks. Although I have to admit, if I faced a very difficult question or a question that I did not understand, I did read the explanation. And I would encourage you to do this if your foundation at uni is not good enough. The reason I did not read the explanations very often is because I felt like my foundation was good enough. I was doing Anki. I had done multiple Qbanks before, so that's why I felt like it was more efficient to be doing more questions and flashcard than spending more time reading things that I already know in the explanations.
Yeah, and this is important. This stresses the importance of early school years, building the foundation, building a solid foundation before moving on into step preparation, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. And you do the questions timed.
Yeah, always random timed.
Random timed.
Yeah, always simulate the exam. It's like basically I wake up every morning and simulate a block of the exam.
AMBOSS, how much time?
Oh, okay. So AMBOSS, I got a 3-month scholarship. So I spent exactly 3 months till I finished AMBOSS. The reason I spent more time is because we started uni. After I finished 1,000 questions, we started uni. So it was a bit more difficult to stay consistent. However, this is when I decided to not read the explanations, and this saved me a lot of time and effort. And I was doing 40 to 80 questions. When I started AMBOSS, I was doing 40 to 80 questions every morning. As soon as I woke up, I'd grab a cup of coffee, start my day, and do those 2 blocks, 1 or 2 blocks of AMBOSS.
Okay, and Kaplan, you said, how much time did you spend?
Unfortunately, Kaplan, I spent a lot of time in this Qbank, even though it's only 2,600 questions, but it was right in the middle of our uni.
University years, yeah. Okay.
So
university exams, I mean.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I spent like maybe 4 months on this Qbank, and I wasn't always consistent. I would do 40 questions like every other day. Sometimes I'd do 80 questions in one, depending on when I have a uni exam. And the one thing that I always kept up with and was very consistent with was my new cards, Anking new cards, and the reviews. And I always did 100 to 150 new cards. And the reason I was doing so many new cards is because I had started the deck a bit late, and I only had 1 year to finish it, so I was doing 100 to 150 new cards every day.
Okay, so here comes the gold standard of question banks, which is UWorld.
Yeah, after Kaplan,
After all these question banks, he just started UWorld, right?
Yes, 3 months before my final uni exams, I bought a 6-month membership. And again, I wasn't very consistent because we had the final uni exams, and sometimes I'd do 40 to 80 questions again. And yeah, even though this was UWorld and they arguably have the best explanations, I was not reading them very often because I felt like I knew a lot just because of Anki and the previous Qbanks I did. But I was always reading the educational objectives, and I did read the explanations of questions that were difficult. Don't get me wrong. So if the block is 40 questions, I might read like 3 to 5 explanations, max 5 explanations. But I read all the educational objectives in the first pass. So.
Okay, so this was 3 months before the university exams, right?
Yeah, exactly. This is when I started doing the first pass of UWorld.
So after the exams, you got into the dedicated period.
Yeah, and the first pass I finished 75% of it before the dedicated period.
So you went into the dedicated period with 75% already complete.
Yep, exactly.
Okay, and how much time did you dedicate for step 1?
How much time my entire step 1 prep?
No, for the dedicated period.
Oh, dedicated period. Oh, my dedicated period was 8.5 weeks. So yeah, 8.5 weeks. And I studied around 7 to 9 hours every day.
Okay, so this is the big thing here. I will talk about the dedicated period. We'll break it off week 1, week 2.
Sure.
Okay, so starting from week 1, what did you do?
Okay, so week 1 I decided to go back to RX, but I only did the hard questions, which were around 1,000 questions. I did them in a week, and yeah, that was all I did, honestly. Yeah, and after I finished RX hard questions, I took an NBME. It was NBME 21, and I scored 265.
Okay. All right. So every week you would take an NBME.
Yes, exactly.
To rate or to assess the past week, right?
Yeah, exactly. Except for the last 2 weeks, I just did NBMEs. Last 2 weeks, all I did
Only
was
NBMEs.
Yep.
Okay. So week 2.
Week 2, this is when I resumed UWorld, so I had 25% left of UWorld, and I finished UWorld in that second week with 95% correct, and I took NBME 22, and I scored 277.
Cool. All right, which is your score?
Yeah, so yeah, as you can see, guys, they're very predictive. At least for me, they were very predictive.
Okay. And week 3?
After I finished my first pass of UWorld, I was introduced to a deck called Zonku. This deck basically incorporates not all, but most of the important points in the UWorld explanations. So I decided to start this deck, and unfortunately it was taking up a lot of time because the deck is quite big. I think it's 6,000 something cards.
Okay, in addition to Zanku deck, which contains the UWorld important points, what did you do else?
I decided to go back to AMBOSS, and I did the 4 and 5 hammer questions for the my weak subjects, not all. So that was like 400 questions only, but I spent a week doing them. I wasn't that efficient, and then I took NBME 23 after this. It was NBME 23?
Yeah, 23.
And I scored 268.
Right. Week 4?
Okay, so week 4, that was when I decided to do the second pass of UWorld, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
So yeah, that was week 4 and 5. So I decided to when I did the first block of UWorld, the second pass, I felt like it was very easy, and I finished it with 35 minutes remaining. So I decided that I would do 5 to 6 blocks a day, and I ended up finishing it in 2 weeks, which is weeks 4 and 5. And I didn't even read the educational objectives because, as I told you, the Zonko deck covers most of the important points from the explanations and educational objectives.
So in just 2 weeks, you finished second pass of UWorld.
Yeah, I was kind of simulating the exam, but don't get me wrong, I was finishing those blocks, those 5 or 6 blocks in only 3 hours, and I finished the second pass with 100%.
So about 30 minutes a block, right?
Yeah, about
Each
30
block.
minutes a block, and barely any reviewing. I would sometimes read the educational objectives, and rarely the explanations for questions that I got wrong, which were 11 mistakes in the entire second pass, which rounded up to 100% overall.
Okay, so now in week 6 and 7, you said you didn't do any questions. You just did the NBMEs.
Yeah, no Qbanks. I stopped. I had finished the second pass of UWorld. And by the way, guys, very important point here. This is one of my biggest regrets doing a second pass of UWorld. I felt like it was a complete waste of time. I did not really learn any new stuff, especially since I started doing the Zonko deck.
Maybe some revising of the material.
Yeah, it was decent. It was decent revision, yeah, but I felt like it was more of a passive thing. I already remembered a lot of the questions, and so it was very easy to go through.
You're not doing it. Okay. Yes.
And after the second pass of UWorld, I took NBME 24, and I scored 270 on that one.
270.
Yep.
Okay.
We have week 6 and 7 now.
Yeah, we're
Week
done.
6. Oh, okay. So no, week 6 and 7, I took an NBME every other day.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's what you said.
Yeah. So sorry. So those were NBMEs 25 to NBME 30, and I scored. This is when I started breaking the 275 plus. NBME 25 was the most difficult though, in my opinion, and my exam was most similar to this NBME. I scored 270 on NBME 25, and NBME 26 274. NBME 27 I scored 277, 3 mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And NBMEs 28 and 29 I made 4 mistakes, which was 275. And finally NBME 30 I made 1 mistake, which was 279. And I also took UWorld self-assessment 1 right after this, week 7.
Week 8. Right.
Week 7 still. Week 8 I took UWorld self-assessment 2 and Fluent 20.
Oh.
And UWorld self-assessment 1 I got 283, and then in the final week all I did was the UWorld self-assessment 2 and the Fluent 20. And again in UWorld self-assessment 2 I also scored 283, which was 4 mistakes, I think. 4.
And in addition to all that, you still did your Anking reviews, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Every single day.
Yeah, Zonko and Anking, both of them.
Okay. Now to the big day, right?
So the day before the exam or the day itself?
Everything, starting the night before.
Okay,
So did you study the night before?
No, the night before all I did was my Anki reviews, and that was it. I just did my Anki reviews. And I did some Anki reviews in advance, so the next day reviews, I tried finishing some of them, but I didn't manage to finish all of them. And I tried to sleep well. I went to bed at around 8 a.m., which is usually my bedtime, and woke up at around 6 a.m. I usually wake up at 5 a.m., but because the night of the exam I woke up multiple times at midnight, so I ended up extending my total sleep time, or total time in bed, making it more than 9 or 10 hours.
You had breakfast?
Yep, I had 6 boiled eggs and a cup of coffee, and that was it. My appetite wasn't good really, so I couldn't eat anything else. And then I went to the exam, and I took 4 protein bars with me, but throughout the entire exam I only ended up eating 1 protein bar because, as I said, my appetite was almost non-existent. And yeah, that was it for the food and during the exam day.
Okay, amazing. Now I want to know more about the experience you had during the exam, the actual exam, while you're were on the computer solving questions. Did it feel like the questions you were solving at home?
Okay, so this is a very important question. The questions were more difficult than any NBME and any test I did at home, but they were definitely closest to the NBMEs in Pre-120, and then AMBOSS, and then UWorld. So the exam was not like UWorld, people, because everybody says the exam is 7 blocks of UWorld or whatever. That wasn't the case. At least for me, that wasn't the case. It felt a lot more like an NBME, and the exam was very tough. I gotta admit, it was more difficult than any test I did at home, and to the point of marking 15 to 20 questions every block. I marked 15 to 20 questions every block. But
you weren't sure about
yes,
15 to 20 questions each block?
I wasn't 100% sure about them. So I tried to keep it safe and mark whenever I wasn't 100%
70%,
sure.
80%?
Yeah, around 70% to, yeah, exactly. And there were like 2 to 3 questions max per block that it was 50-50 and I had to make an educated guess. And I had 20 to 25 minutes remaining after each block, so that was more than enough time to review those 15 to 20 questions.
Okay, so what about your experience after the exam?
Okay.
Did you feel anxious about the results? Did you feel pleased?
Okay, so throughout the exam, I wasn't sure of many questions, but then when I came out of the exam, I felt like I underperformed. Right after the exam, I felt like I had underperformed, and the last block, I did not go well because I was very drained and I was dozing off a lot, to the point of making a mistake on a question that was in the free 120. And yeah, that felt very bad and it haunted me until the results day.
This is a 277 scorer talking. It's absolutely normal that you feel doubts during and after the exam, right? Even for top scorers like him.
So yeah, when I came out, I felt like I had underperformed, and because I was marking so many questions and there were so many questions I wasn't sure of. And I kept Googling stuff, and then I realized that, yeah, I made 1 or 2 silly mistakes. And then there were another, I'd say 1 silly mistake, and then 5 to 10 questions that I wasn't sure of. I can't say they were mistakes. They might be right. Maybe all of them are right, maybe half of them are right. I just couldn't find the answer on the internet. So that's when I realized, okay, my performance is not that bad, but I felt like I did a bit better at home.
Of course,
yeah.
This is test anxiety. Okay, Yusuf, thank you so much. You did an amazing job. People will definitely benefit from your experience.
Thank you so much.
I'm
glad to be here.